All right, I think we're probably about ready to go. Kim, Scott, are you guys all set for some fun today?
I'm ready.
All set.
All right, magnificent. Well, thank you to everyone for spending an hour of your day with us. I'm James Rowe, member of the ownership team here at Affirmative. The purpose of this session is to provide you with we'll give you an update on or an overview of what Nacha 26 is all about. But our main goal today is to show you how our platform capabilities line up against the Nacha 26 new requirements, and then we're going to go through a few slides to show you that. And then we are going to dive into our platform to show you some of the things the capabilities that we have built into it that are new, along with some of the existing capabilities that will help you meet Nacha 26 in style. We're all dialing in from Florida. Kim Robertson and Scott Brown run our product. They're the dynamic duo with respect to that. In addition to that responsibility, Kim handles our implementations. So all of our existing customers and all of you prospects out there that are soon to be customers, you'll be working with Kim to get your data integrated with us smoothly and efficiently. And Scott, in addition to his responsibilities in the product area with Kim, setting our roadmap, making sure we get things done like these Nacha 26 enhancements, Scott is our Chief Information Security Officer. It's his job to make sure that your data stay safe and work with your organizations as they conduct security audits pre and post sale. So welcome, Kim and Scott. We've talked a little bit about the agenda for today. We're really kind of action-packed, and we want to save as much time as we can to show you in our platform these capabilities, and we're very excited about that. So we'll get to that. That's step 3. We'll try to spend most of the session in the system. We do have a couple slides before that we'd like to cover with you just to set the stage. So why don't we move forward there, Scott, if you don't mind? So what we'd like to do to get started, we had a webinar last month where we talked about the Nacha requirements and our interpretation of them. This session is really meant to focus in on what we do to meet those requirements in the system. But we do want to give you a quick primer or refresher on those requirements as they relate to what you're doing. So I'm going to ask Kim maybe to talk through this slide, if you don't mind, Kim.
Sure. So with the new Nacha 2026 rule change, we are going to have 2 big dates to keep in mind. The first is going to be March 20th of next year, and it's going to be for ODFIs, originators, third-party senders, and third-party processors. It's for anybody that is going to have 6 million or more in entries on the origination side. And for RDFIs, it's for 10 million or more in incoming received volume. So phase 2 is going to be for June 19th of next year, and that is going to apply to all other ACH participants. So the big thing with this rule change is it is saying that we must implement a risk-based fraud monitoring process and procedures. And those process and procedures must be reviewed at least annually. And I know in a little while, James is going to get more into detail on the risk-based approach and how this can be addressed and taken care of. But one other thing before we move on to that with this change is also standardizing the entry descriptions for payroll and for purchases. So not only is that going to be or is going to help identify fraud, but it's also going to help a financial institution know what's coming in to the bank. So that's going to help with further analysis, further know what's coming into your financial institution. Primarily right now, financial institutions have some sort of monitoring in place for outgoing transactions to identify fraud. But a big shift with this change is it's forcing financial institutions to start looking at incoming transactions also. So, on that note, I can hand it over to you, James.
Yeah, so I'd love to just talk a little bit. A key theme about the Nacha 26 rule changes that we've talked about, I think it's useful to dive in on a little bit, is this concept of the expectation that financial institutions are going to take what's termed a risk-based approach. And let's talk through exactly what that means, right? The first question is what is risk? What does it mean, right? So basically, the risk, another way to think about the risk of something is like the chances it happens, or, as a statistician would say, the probability of an event, right? What are the chances, or what's the risk that something adverse is going to occur? What kind of adverse action, or what kind of adverse occurrence could there be? In our business, it could be an unauthorized return. It could be a return for any reason, an NSF return. It could be an originator that submits unauthorized activity into the system, or it could be some other type of fraud. In my view, anyway, the most prevalent type of fraud, as technically defined in our industry, is unauthorized activity. Submitting an unauthorized ACH into the system is equivalent to fraud, and it's probably the most common type of fraud that occurs, right? So the idea of managing or understanding that risk is really trying to understand the chance or the probability that event is going to occur. Think about it like the weather. You get up in the morning, and before you go out to your day, you look at the Weather Channel, and you read what the chances of rain are, right? If it's a 1% chance of rain, your actions for the rest of that day are different than if it's a 70% chance of rain, right? You might plan different events. You might take an umbrella or not. If you take an umbrella every day, in other words, you assume it's going to rain every day, then you're wasting your time. You're carrying things you don't need to. If you never carry an umbrella and it rains, in other words, if you get the probability incorrect, or you misunderstand the risk, then you're not effectively using your time. The same concept applies here. What we do at Affirmative is, and particularly as it relates to these requirements, is we're providing you with tools that help you understand and measure the risk of an occurrence which would be adverse to your financial institution. And that understanding that risk, whether it's at the originator level or at the transaction level, allows you to tailor your actions, like taking an umbrella or not, right? Or going to the park, or going to a movie, right? Tailor your actions to accommodate the specific situation. So that's our goal, is to help you sort of manage and understand that risk or that probability of occurrence. We're going to talk more about this as it relates to some of the predictive tools, because we're helping you predict, and this is the other key feature. Understanding the risk is using information that's available to you today to predict the probability or the chances something's going to happen in the future. And that's our mission. One of our key missions in this is to provide you with tools that allow you to do that. So we'll dive into that in more detail in a little bit. But we want to establish this concept of risk-based actions, or a risk-based approach, because that is really a key theme of what Nacha expects us to adopt more of as an industry. Okay? Scott, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. This, I would say, is probably the main slide, and we want to show you our system, but this is really the main slide to cover today. And we wanted to be as specific as possible around exactly what capabilities we have in our system. Some of these we've always had. Some we've built specific for Nacha 26. For example, received reporting. We hadn't had in the past because it hadn't been a requirement. It hadn't been something a lot of customers demanded. We've now built received dashboards and received reporting and incoming pattern detection to help you manage risk into the system. But what we're doing here is we've broken down the Nacha requirements into really 4 key dimensions. And then we're going to talk through at a high level now, and then we'll show you many of these in the system, exactly what capabilities we line up against each of these dimensions. And we're going to start with the dimension of monitoring originations for anomalous activity. This is being able to monitor at the transaction level for activity that suggests that there's a higher than usual chance or risk of an adverse event. Kim, would you mind talking through a couple of these? And we're going to kind of tag team with Scott and myself as we talk through each of these capabilities. And then we'll also quickly cover use cases. And I'll keep us sort of disciplined on time, so we'll have plenty of time to go into the system.
Yeah, and I think a really important piece of this too is painting that picture, because when Nacha has these rule changes, they kind of give some guidance, right? But then you've got to figure out the how to do this. So I think this piece is going to paint a really good picture of, with what the rule change is versus how you can manage to that rule change. So yeah, so the first one up on the list, we've got your debit item return risk. That is 100% going to cover those outgoing items, that is required to be monitored for this Nacha rule change. And that's really going to give you the opportunity to be proactive with this. And that's a big piece of this, is not being reactive, but being proactive, and also monitoring, based off of your originators and what they're doing, and not just kind of having a blanket fraud prevention piece out there. That's where the risk based monitoring actually comes in. Same thing with like the velocity based monitoring. That's going to give you your peaks, your valleys of how you as a financial institution and how your originators individually are doing with their volumes and the frequencies that they're originating. We have your balanced and unbalanced activity. So that's a big piece too, because if you know that you have, a balanced originator, an originator that's sending out balanced files, you need to make sure that what's actually going out the door is balanced. So you need to have some sort of proactive visibility on that. So being able to monitor, on that daily basis and saying, okay, yep, it matches what they sent out, is what is the credits and the debits kind of match. Um, Limit utilization. So I know we've had a lot of topic of conversation, here internally, and with the payment associations and just our customer base in general, around limit utilization and how much of a struggle across the board it actually is. And really being able to tailor to your originators and help manage that risk, because a lot of times you've got a financial institution and they just will literally pull a number out of the air on what sort of limit to give their originator. So what Scott's going to show you and James is going to talk about later on this piece, it's incredibly important that you've got this additional visibility and this additional risk monitoring on this, because this can not only help again protect your FI, the network, but it's really going to help protect and benefit your originators also.
Thank you, Kim. I'm going to step in because
Okay.
I forgot to mention earlier, we have a Q&A. Someone noticed that without me suggesting it and submitted a question. And I'm going to read this question because I think it's an important one to cover right now. Are these platforms included in the base package, or do we have to purchase additional modules? So the answer to that question is everything you see, you pay one subscription fee each month. It's the base. It's the base package. And not only do you get everything that we're showing you today, but we also continuously upgrade the system, right? So every year we invest in, I invest in three areas, right? People, tools, and data. We're adding smart people like Kim and Scott to our team to help us get better at managing risk, and that helps you get better as a user of the system. Tools, additional BI capabilities, additional reports, and then data, how we organize and manage our data. We make capital investments every year. So, and then we also update the system every year for regulatory changes. This year was a big one with Nacha 26. We do that as a part of what we offer to you, but every year we adjust the system, add to it to keep you on top of the appropriate rules and regulations. So all that is included. We don't nickel and dime you on this deal. It's a long-term one price relationship. So that's the answer to that question. I want to cover, and feel free to submit other questions. We'll get to those as we're able throughout the presentation. This debit item return risk, right? So I want to, this is what we do is we're predicting for each transaction that you originate, we're going to tell you, whether it's a low risk transaction, a medium risk transaction, or a high risk transaction. And what that means is, if it's a low risk transaction, it's got virtually 0% chance of being returned, 0.01% chance. If it's a medium risk transaction, it's got, I think, less than a 3% chance of being returned. And if it's a high risk transaction, it's got a 10% or greater chance of being returned. And then that allows you, and I also want to say that typically, it varies. We've got clients all across the country, and we're using all of this network data to build these predictive tools, right? We're giving you the ability as the clients of ours to leverage our network of information in a way that protects the confidentiality of the data for each client. But it anonymizes, it helps us build models, and you can leverage the power of the data across the country, all ACH activity. We see more than $1 trillion ACH activity every year through our system, and we're able to take that data and model it and predict at the transaction level, low, medium, or high risk. What you can do with this is you can look at those high risk transactions, you can validate them, you can establish reserves just against the high risk transactions, and let the low risk transactions give them credit for that, right? The high risk transactions, you can hold those funds, you can set reserve accounts. And so we're allowing you, this is like I mentioned before, the risk-based approach. This is where we're helping you predict the likelihood or the chance or the risk that that transaction is going to be returned so that you can take action on it in time to mitigate any exposure for your financial institution. We'll show you more about this later, but I just want to make that point on this one. The second section, monitor return patterns and rates. Kim or Scott, I'm gonna let either one of you that wants to tackle this one. Who's jumping at it?
I'll take this one. So you can see it's kind of broken down into three primary topics. We have our HEI originator risk, and like the transaction risk model, this model predicts the likelihood that any originator is going to have unauthorized returns in the coming 60 days. So that's going to further allow you to segment those originators again into high, medium, and low buckets, and then used in conjunction with that transaction risk score. Now you're really homing in. You can say it's a high risk originator, a high risk transaction. That's probably your most probable, area, where your low risk transactions and low risk originators are your least. So it's just another way to further segment that data. We'll show you some reporting around that. We have historical return rate monitoring. Naturally, you're all doing this today in accordance with Nacha guidelines. So you need to obviously continue to do that, because past activity is somewhat predictive of future activity, but used in conjunction is actually one of the inputs to our model scoring. But you're just going to want to be obviously watching that over time. And now specifically to your R17s, anything that's being returned is questionable. Certainly a sudden spike in a volume of R17s coming back to any given originator, that could suggest fraud, something that you want to monitor to more closely.
Thank you, Scott. Same idea on this originator risk. And these are, you'll see this section in our platform called ATI Analytics, Predictive Analytics. We're taking all the information. When we get all these transactions, we aggregate them under originators. Even if the originator has multiple accounts, we aggregate all activity under an originator, and we create what are called summary attributes. And then we use those summary attributes to build our predictive tools, and we keep them up to date. And so when we tell you each month, we update this based on prior activity for that originator, based on all the data in our network. If we tell you it's a low risk originator, there's less than 1% chance that that originator is going to have any unauthorized activity at all. If it's a medium risk originator, I believe it's a 5% chance that that originator is going to have unauthorized activity. So a little more than none, but some. And if it's a high risk originator, that means there's a 70% chance or greater that that originator is going to submit unauthorized activity in the system. If you knew that at the beginning of each month, I would ask you to consider, how would you tailor your controls effectively? How would you prioritize your originator reviews? Would you focus on the ones that are at the most risk or the ones that are at the least risk? Who would you manage exposure limits for more effectively? So we're providing you with these tools based on the data that's available today, that you have, we collect for you, and we organize and we score, and we're providing you this low, medium, or high grade That's telling you what's going to happen in the future. And we're going to show you that in the system too. That's another one of those risk-based approaches we want to highlight. Let's get to the next section, detect and respond to incoming fraud. I tell you what I'm going to do, Scott, I'm going to put you on the hook for this one because I know you're going to show this section, and then we'll let Kim cover the last section about the audit trails.
All right, so that's where we're going to be starting today's demo. So it begins with an incoming dashboard, which is going to be like a high-level overview of all the activity you're getting as an RDFI, the incoming transactions, the volumes, the dollar amounts, the SEC codes, to establish a base understanding. Because when we're talking about fraud, that's going to be deviations from what's typical, what's anormal. But if you don't know to begin with, you know, like what does normal look like for us, it's going to be very hard to identify when there's those fraudulent patterns. So that's where we start. We establish a baseline, just like you do on your origination side. You're going to say, what does typical volumes and dollars look like for us? And then from there, we're going to offer you anomalous pattern detection reporting. We're very excited to be introducing this, where a lot of the time on the origination side, we're doing rule-based, right? We're saying like, what's the origination limit set for this originator, their exposure limit, and then we're monitoring against that. Or what's the SEC codes, are they allowed to originate? On the incoming side, it's more pattern-based. We're not saying like, what is SEC codes is this account allowed to receive, but what SEC codes does this account typically receive? What does normal look like for them? So that when we find things that fall outside of that, we can properly identify it. I'll show you examples when we go into the demo. And then the third one is micro-entry reporting. We have a special pattern for identifying those. And then just your general micro-entry reporting, your account verifies, you know, those $100 transactions that have been properly identified. You're going to want to monitor those separately. We're not going to specifically look at those in the demo today, but that's part of the process that you're going to want to look for, identify any micro-transaction fraud, that kind of activity.
Excellent. And this is an area, as I mentioned earlier, that we've built out. Like, this is a complete new addition to the platform. The risk-based grading is a new, like at the transactional level and the originator level, that's a new addition to the platform as well. The R17 return monitoring, that's a new addition to the platform. There's a few of these that are new. A lot of these, including this last one, which we're about to get to, is really what we've always done. It's just now there's more of a focus on doing it. Kim, do you want to speak to the audit requirement piece?
Yeah, so, when we're developing these new reports, this new analytics, it's not just, the Kim, James, and Scott says, hey, we should do this. This would be cool. We actually go out and we have roundtable sessions. We meet with the payment associations. We meet with financial institutions, credit unions, big credit unions, small credit unions, big banks, small banks, community banks, and we get a good feel of what the market is needing. And part of doing that allows us to know, like, hey, what are the auditors looking for? When we're talking to these payment associations, we're talking to their auditors. So when we develop this package, and we roll it out and we roll out enhancements, it's audit ready. So when you have your risk assessment or you have your annual audit, you're able to pull up these reports and automatically demonstrate that you're maintaining compliance and you're in proactive risk management. You're just not in a reactive part of the bank. So
Excellent.
it's really been neat to get out there and see that piece especially be automated for financial institutions, because a lot of the time, well, I think probably a majority of you feel like you probably stay in an audit. If it's not an external audit going on, it's some sort of internal audit. So being able to have this stuff automated and just being able to on a whim pull it up and provide what is needed makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it's no point in doing all this if you can't show it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do for you. All right, let's go to the, thank you, Kim. And mostly what happens is Kim has all these conversations and comes back and says, Scott and James, this is what we need to do. And we say, yes, ma'am. That's actually how it works. She made it a little more collaborative on that. We appreciate that, Kim. Let's go to the next slide, Scott. Now, I mentioned earlier, I just want to cover a couple of these things. I want to really help put this in context because this is like a new thing for the industry. And I think it's very exciting and very powerful, and we want to try to help everybody get their heads around it so that they can fully leverage it. This ATI originator risk grade, this is the grading we've built on our proprietary modeling that we use all, the transaction data, we get it organized by originator, we create attributes, we do modeling. Think of it as a FICO score for originators. And what we've done, instead of giving you the 3-digit score, most people are pretty familiar with FICO scores. We're telling you not the risk of defaulting on a loan like a FICO does. We're telling you the chance or the risk or the probability that that originator is going to have unauthorized activity in the next 60 or so days. And we do these grades every month. The beginning of the month, we update our system. You can go in, you can pull a list of your high risk originators. You can see who's gone from medium risk to high risk, low risk to high risk. And if we, and these are statistics I want to share with you that are like the average is what we see across our financial institutions in general, right? Typically, 79% of originators at a financial institution will have on any monthly basis a low risk originators. And that means there's less than 1%, virtually 0% chance there's going to be any activity, any unauthorized activity at all for that originator. If it's medium risk, that's about 19%, a little higher risk profile, but still a relatively low probability, 5% chance, right? There's 2%. Now, if you do business with high risk originators more than your competition, you may have more than 2%, right? 2% typically are high risk originators. The very small percent are responsible for an overwhelming majority of unauthorized activity on any given month. There's a 70% or greater chance that those originators that we grade as high risk are going to have unauthorized activity. A lot of people ask us, what are the risk factors? Our modeling is, it goes when it searches the data, it's machine learning, and I actually do it myself, and I love doing it. I love talking technical about it, but it's important to sort of explain in a straightforward way. What are some of the factors that we analyze to get to these grades and to update them every month? And I want to give you some examples here. What is the historical return activity? I want to say this, just because someone has historical returns, even unauthorized in the past, it doesn't mean there's a high risk they're going to have it in the future, right? It's a combination of all these factors that we turn into this one grade, like a FICO score. It's a function of a lot of different pieces of credit information. That's what we're doing here. We're modeling it into one grade that compares and combines on a statistical basis all of this information into one measure. Is the originator under a third-party processor? Were there prior return check transactions? What is the SEC code distribution of that client in terms of how they originate their payments? And so these are some examples. How many times have we seen that that bank account before with successful transactions, right? How many notice NOC1s have there been for that particular originator? We calculate all this information and we use this to update our models every month. And so the factors that go into our risk determination, here's an example of some of them. Now, this is at the originator level. Let's cover the transaction level. Last slide I promised before we go into the demo. At the transaction level, we're predicting for every debit origination that's outgoing, we're predicting the likelihood that that's going to be returned. It could be returned for unoff, could be returned for NSF, could be returned for any reason. It was just there's a relatively small percentage of unauthorized. So what we're doing here is we're predicting return, and I'll tell you about the main benefit of doing it that way in a minute. If we use the same risk factors, if it's a high risk originator based on our grade, it's also a high risk transaction. So that's one of the factors, but it's not the only factor. What's the hold period associated with it? What is the SEC code for that particular transaction? How many previous transactions have we seen from that account before, right? Is this a brand new bank ABA, a bank number for us, right? What is the bank institution type? Is it a credit union? Is it an S&L? And then what is the account type? Is it business or consumer? Here are some examples of the risk factors that go into our modeling or our grading at the transaction level. So every day you log in, you'll see a list of your transactions, and we'll score those and we'll grade those low, medium, or high. If it's low, virtually 0%, less than 1% chance it's going to be returned. If it's medium, there's a 3% chance. I may have said 5% before, apologies. And if it's high, it's 10%. Now, what you can do with this information, obviously, you can go into the high-risk transactions because typically is only 1% of your transactions. If you want to pick transactions to review, use these, go review these, right? Outgoing transactions to verify or validate. We're isolating a very small percent of your portfolio, like the originators, that you can focus your actions on. The low-risk transactions you don't need to worry about. So you can act that way. And then you can also predict the return rate for your institution as a whole. If you took all of your daily transactions and you segmented them low, medium, or high, and then you multiplied the amount of each of those transactions by the risk of return, these probabilities, that tells you what funds you're likely to have returned, right, on that day's worth of transactions. And that's useful for requiring reserves at the originator level targeted to their high risk debits. Or even at the financial institution level, you can predict the future. You can understand the risk or exposure of transactions you put into the system and the likelihood, how much of that, you can even quantify how much of that you can expect to come back by applying these probabilities. And in the system, this is where I'm showing you these statistics, like the distribution and the outcome. In the system, we actually grade these for you, but then we also show you your own results over time. We'll show you a month's worth of originator grades, and then over the next 2 months, how many of those originators had unauthorized. You can actually tailor these statistics. What is the distribution and what are the probability, what is the occurrence in each group to your specific portfolio? And so that's very helpful for all kinds of portfolio modeling. Did I miss anything on that, Scott or Kim? Cover that pretty good?
Yeah.
Let's go into the demo. Without further ado, Scott's going to fire up our demo.
All right. I saw there was a question about access to this data. Today, I'm going to demonstrate everything through the platform. But if you're working in a more tech-savvy area and you want to discuss other ways of getting access to this data, we'll share some contact information at the end. Just shoot us an email, start that conversation. We're happy to talk to you about that.
There is one question I see on here. Can you exceed over a month's worth of data? I'm not sure what that question means, so you may want to clarify. We'll get her answered for you. Unless you guys understand that. I mean, you can pull up if you can pull up in the reporting more than a month. You can do all your transactions if you want.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Scott. We'll hit some questions later. We got a lot in here. We'll cover them in the queue as we go through, but why don't you, so the goal of this demo, this is our platform, right? I think maybe, Scott, if you could take a minute, so there's really 2 sections when users get in here. There's a dashboard section, which is like the main overview, and there's 3 categories. I mean, this is like the highest level. There's the originations activity, what's outgoing. There's the incoming, that's the new piece, right? What's coming in, you can have a dashboard on that. And then there's originator risk. A lot of our clients want to get in and go and look specifically at an originator, see their risk grade, and also historical origination and return activity on that originator. So that's why we put these 3 dashboards here. Scott's going to cover the new stuff in these dashboards, and then we're going to dig in. There's a series of reports in the next section that are much more targeted and specific. And so it's sort of broken up by folder: origination reports, return reports, a whole bunch of reports around originator reviews. I mentioned earlier the ATI predictive analytics. This is where you can get your list of high-risk originators and high-risk transactions on a daily or monthly basis, whatever you want. And then the incoming items, which I know Scott's going to cover because that's a new section as well. Back to you, Scotty.
All right, so we're going to start with our broad incoming item dashboard. This is kind of informing you, as I had said, about this is where you establish what is typical for our financial institution. So at the top there, we start with our KPIs. These are our high-level broad numbers, types of things you're going to use for board reporting, or if you have a question from management about, what did we do last month? This is where you can gather that data. So active accounts tells us how many types of business checking, savings checking, GL accounts, what is receiving transaction data. How much did we do in credits and debits, and what was the value of those transactions? And then we start drilling in, right? What does that look like on a monthly basis? So we can establish our trend. And this was really informative as we were building out this new series of reports. On the incoming side, there's a lot of variability between financial institutions. Some are debit heavy, some are credit heavy. So just know that there really is no one industry standard of you couldn't say, well, is it normal for my debits and credits volumes to be balanced? Because from what we're seeing, it really, really varies from institution to institution. Next to that, we have our variance reporting. So we can see, how does that change month over month? Is our volume fairly stable, or do we see any spikes or any sudden drops? Then you can look at that same data based on the value of those transactions. We're looking at the financial institution, the ODFI, who is sending your account holders those transactions. And this pattern does pretty much hold true. Most of the banks and credit unions that I've taken the time to look at kind of follow this pattern. They have 3 or 4 larger trading partners. A lot of time it is your larger national, your Wells Fargo's and your JP Morgan Chase's. And then it kind of tails off. But this way, it's very easy to say, like, these are the 10 banks that we're doing the most volume or the highest dollars with. And then we have our SEC codes. And over here, we're saying, does this align with our expectations? We're expecting to mostly do CCD, PPD, and WEP in this example. Is that proportionately what I expected to see? If we're not doing a lot of IATs, this lets me know very easily, oh, that's less than 1% of my overall volume. That's in alignment with what I expected. And for all of this data, and a lot of the examples today we're going to look at are going to be graphical, just know that all of this data is always going to be available in a table format. So if you're in an operations area, like your pie chart's nice, but I need to drill in and get the details, just know it's always going to be there behind the scenes and available for you to access.
Beautiful. Hey, a couple quick question responses. One is this is all like I mentioned before. This is all like our standard packages you get. Like when you do business with us, we integrate your data. We not plan to talk about how we integrate data today. We got a very efficient way to do it. A lot of times we can get the transaction data from the Fed. And so it minimizes your financial institution's, activity as that relates. Kim loves to talk about that. She was the inventor of that process for us, which we're very grateful for. Once we get your data in, this is a package you get, right? It's this. And the other question, this is the standard package that you start with. We set this up for you. And then if you want us to configure things, to change things, to move things around, or to add reports that are specific to your needs, we can do that for you too. But this is like out of the box. We have clients get in this thing in 30 days, and we just get that transaction data pulled in and set them up, and they're good to go. And then over time, we optimize and improve it, based on your specific needs. So a couple questions there. Do you want to show? Can we quickly show the originator review? I don't know if you're planning to do that. The dashboard. You were going to cover that in a report.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry. That when Scott goes, he's telling me to shut up because he's got a plan, and I respect that. So go ahead, Scott.
Sure. So before we leave the incoming side, I do want to talk about those irregular incoming patterns, right? Because that's another big part and a new part for most financial institutions is this monitoring of these incoming items. So I have just a few examples here to show you. The first one are irregular tax deposits. So these are IRS Treasury 310 credits going into accounts. We looked across the entire financial institution space of everyone we serve and said, can we model this? Can we determine what is typical and what is atypical for an account holder to receive transactions? And the answer was yes. So anytime that we look at each new incoming Treasury 310 and say, is this regular for this account? And for those that aren't, we would flag them. And this is a really good example. So we can see here on February 26th, this Jason Gomez received, this is their 4th IRS Treasury 310 deposit for $3,000. And then again on 3/12, they received a 5th one for $5,000. So we're flagging those transactions. We didn't flag the first, right? Because that was probably an original deposit and maybe an amended return, maybe a husband and wife. But by the time we get to the 4th and the 5th deposits, these are now falling outside of what was expected. So we're flagging these. It could be that it's just a lot of amended returns. It could be that it's a tax preparer using a personal account for distribution, or it could be identity fraud where this person is filing taxes using other people's information. But either way, the report catches it, it flags it, it's very easy and quick to pull, and then you can determine like, okay, does this need to go to fraud for further investigation? Another popular pattern is this low value transactions. So these are transactions that are not flagged as account verifications, but they're still under $1. And there were many of them in the batch. And I think this is a really good example. You can see it's from paychecks, but the batch description says taxes, their CCD authorizations going to individuals, the debits and the credits aren't balancing on these transactions. we're not saying it's fraud, but we are saying it's unusual behavior. So we've identified the transactions. It's very easy to take these, export them to an Excel spreadsheet, send them over to fraud, put them into your ticketing system and say, hey, these need to be researched. They came through today, right? We didn't flag every single pre-note. We just found those that looked unusual and are raising them again to your attention.
Yeah, can I make a couple points here, Scott? On that one, it's like based on the information we have on this transaction, this is a higher than usual risk or chance that it's going to be a problem for you, right? So that's the risk-based approach, right? We're identifying anomalous transactions that you should be able to research, and we're focusing you in on the ones that have the highest probability of being a problem, right? Now the other thing is our patterns. We have how many we have now? We have 3 in here. I don't include micro deposits, does it? But my point is, we built these 3 patterns in. They're not the last 3 we built, right? This is based on our clients giving us feedback. Here is the most common types of issues or anomalies we see that we'd like to have in the system. Our clients are our community, so they give us feedback, and we build the patterns based on that. But we will build more over time. This is just for the initial launch. One other quick question that came in, I saw as important one, is existing client asking, where can I see this in the system? That's really a question about when we're rolling this out. We are currently rolling out this whole package. We have 2 existing clients that are kicking the tires for us. They're using it. And then over the next week or 2, we just want to make sure we're all good and all the T's are crossed and I's are dotted. And then we're going to make it available to everybody else. So we'll make an announcement on that. So you don't have this today, but it'll be in the next couple of weeks. It's just being sort of beta tested, I guess you'd say, by a couple of clients.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the last pattern, and I'll just be real brief on this one, is the dormant originators. So this is saying you had this originator at your institution, sending your account holders, right? They weren't your originator. They were an originator, went dormant, has reinitiated. Now they're sending my account holder a $117,000 debit, or I'm sorry, credit. Is this typical activity for this account? So the next area, so that covers our origination activity. The next area we're looking at, covers our incoming activity. The next area I wanted to look at and show a little bit about was the outgoing activity, that origination activity. Starting with this HI originator risk score. That's the one that James was speaking to that predicts the likelihood that your originators will submit unauthorized. So you can see here, I pulled this for, say, this account. I'll get a listing of the originators underneath them with their risk ratings, and then just this dial gauge. It makes it really easy to interpret, right? Green is low, yellow is medium, red is high. You can see I'm pointing to red. I know I'm dealing with a high-risk originator. So that's a good first indicator that this is more likely to have some type of unauthorized activity. I might want to increase my risk controls around them. Something you might want to be looking at, I think everyone would recommend you'll be looking at, is limit utilization, right? Especially when we're dealing with high-risk cases. Here, we're showing it graphically. And as I mentioned before, all this is also available in a table for the operations team. But really nice to present graphically, especially when you're dealing with your relationship manager, trying to give them a snapshot. This dotted line here, that's the credit limit. The moving line is what they're actually using. And this is why it's so important that that credit limit is set near the actual usage, right? We don't want to set a $100,000 credit limit, especially if they're more susceptible to fraudulent type activity, because then they're going to be account takeover and they're going to be pushing funds out of the account. We want that limit set very closely to what the actual activity of the originator is. This is a really good way to illustrate how well that line or that limit is set. And then, of course, the same for debits. When monitoring the originator on the fraudulent side, right, we can use the SEC code distributions that we have today. We kind of talked about what it looked like on the incoming side, and we kind of do the same thing on the outgoing side. what portion of their activity is web, and are we considering web higher risk activity than, say, PPD and CCD? I also wanted to show this by date. So another way to use that same data is saying, like, hey, we want to monitor what does that web activity look like over time, and then I'm looking to see if there's any sudden spikes. If it's typically around 8,000 a month, and then I suddenly see it shoot up to 50,000 items, that's a red flag. That's something that needs to be investigated. And then, as we were talking about before, we want to be doing our return rate monitoring. Of course, we want to be looking at that historically, and this is actually, I think, a pretty good example where the originator had some activity, everything went dormant, now they've resumed, we're seeing return rates come back up, and they're spiking kind of high, above those thresholds that we'd have established, certainly above that 0.5% on unauthorized.
Yep. Can I make a couple points? I got booted off earlier. Hopefully, we were all good. I got back on. I don't know what the issue was, but like you talk about use case or second on this stuff. Like everyone's got to do originator reviews, and a lot of our clients, for example, don't have enough resources to review all originators on a regular basis, and that can get them into trouble with their auditors and just business practice, risk management internally. This is a tool you can use to prioritize originator reviews. You can look at the high risk ones, and you can focus in on those. But then the other side of it, and then you can set controls based on risk. High risk, you can take a more measured approach, right? And you can target it to the 1 or 2% of your originator population that really requires it. Hold periods, for example, lower limits, etc. But then the other side of that, the 80% of your portfolio of originators that have virtually zero risk of unauthorized activity, treat them well and use it as a sales tool. Bring more of those types in and give them more liberal terms because the exposure is very low. And what that means is that's going to be a benefit for other areas of the financial institution because you're going to bring in more customers. So there's a revenue growth opportunity associated with this. And they're going to do more business with your financial institution if you give them more liberal terms on how you manage their payments. So these are a couple of use cases here.
And I think that dovetails really nicely into this last return risk report. So this is the ATI debit return risk score, which is segmenting all of the originations on a daily basis that are going out and is doing that prediction. You can see here we have them categorized from highest to lowest. And this is going to allow you to find those transactions that are most likely to return so that you can put those proper controls in place, right? So for instance, here we had a high risk debit for $24,000. As James was just saying, right? Like this is one of those accounts we're going to be like, there's a 10% chance that this item's going to get returned. We need to make sure that we have the proper reserves in place or that there's a hold period so that if this item returns, right, we're not trying to claw the funds back from the originator because we proactively. And on the flip side of all of these low risk transactions, less than 1% chance that those are returning. So these maybe we can offer, immediate funds availability to or reduced reserve accounts on. There's a very low likelihood that any of these items are coming back.
Beautiful. What else is there anything else that you want to show us or you plan to show us today, Scott, in here?
Just one last note before we jump out of the demo and go into questions. And I know I've shown a number of reports, but I just want to make it very clear that all of these reports can be automated, so they can be automatically generated and distributed. And you can set alerting up on these to say, right, I have this return risk report, for example, here. I'm going to set up an automatic alert and I'm going to monitor for transactions that are at $5,000 or greater, or that are within certain parameters that I set. So it's not a requirement, like you're not getting piled on additional work in addition to what you're already doing today. It could be a one-time setup where I'm going to come in here, I'm going to set up my conditions on what I want to be alerted on, and then when those conditions are triggered, then I know to log in and to review these reports. I think the alerting portion of it is going to be very key to setting up a successful fraud monitoring program.
Hey, before you get out, one question is the ATI originator risk report available now? And the answer to that question is yes, should be in your BS setup. And if you need, if somebody show you where, reach out to Lexi. She'll get that squared away for you. Now, if you could, Scott, go to the report section. I want to show everybody something. I love the modeling. You may be able to tell. I think it's a super powerful tool. I love using our data and helping our industry predict things and really revolutionize how things are done. What we're doing in here, we have this new folder, ATI Predictive Analytics. You can go into each of these. We talked about the ATI originator risk. That's the grade at the originator level. And then there's the debit item return risk. That's the grade at the transaction level. Well, what we do is you can go in here to actually get your lists of high, medium, and low transactions or originators. We're not going to show you that. Scott's already showed you that a little bit. But I do want to show you the risk performance. So if you, Scott, click the originator risk performance, there you go. So what we've built into this thing, we have created these statistics that I showed you earlier, related to like what you would expect coming in without this data on for your portfolio. And it's actually pretty consistent. We have clients that do, higher risk business and clients that do lower risk business. So it varies a little bit, but largely there's a very small percentage of high risk for everybody, and everybody else is mostly low risk. And so you can go in with these, I guess, we call it a priori expectations about what your distribution is going to be in each grade and what your unauthorized percentage, in other words, the percent of originators that are submitting unauthorized in each grade are. But we actually validate this for you. We prove to you how well this works because we actually go take your data and we create these distributions for you based on your own actual experience. So for in this case, we would go from 2 months ago, we're in August now, so I guess June, to the scores that the grades we had that month. And then we tell you, here's where your originators fit in each group. And you can get that more contemporaneously. In other words, you can get it for this month in a different report. But here, we're showing you where the distribution was 2 months ago, and then we're actually showing you what percentage of those originators actually did have unauthorized. Factual, actual, unauthorized. So you can validate these and update your probability estimates if you're doing any portfolio modeling based on these, what these percentages tell you. Let's show them the same thing for the transaction. I mean, it looks the same, but I'm just so happy about it. I want to show the same thing twice. So the same deal here. We show you the grade for your transactions, and we go in and we'll say, we'll take transactions from the last month, I think it is, and then we'll see those transactions in each of those grade groups. What was the distribution? So you know that. And then what was the actual return rate in each group? So you can update these actual return rates, and you can use that for your exposure modeling if you like. And we're happy to have a session and dig into the details of how all that works if you like. But those are a couple areas. We actually validate the results for you, so you don't have to just trust that we're telling you, what it is. You can go check it out for yourself. Any other questions or comments about this? We got about 8 minutes left. I think we're good on our questions. Kim, do you have anything that you want to say about any of these reports or how they can be used and, the importance of monitoring and tracking all this good stuff?
I think just a lot of these reports can have multi uses also. They can be used not only for board reporting, for your, showing your auditors, audit compliance, your monthly department reporting, but then also, it can be looked at by like your risk modeling team, your chief risk officer. So, a lot of what we provide, it doesn't just focus on one specific area. It can be beneficial to multiple areas of the financial institution. And especially as, an FI is looking to grow, you've got to have data, you've got to have good data. And that's where we can really come into play with helping source that good quality data, because good data in, right, good reporting out, bad data in, bad reporting out. So that's a huge focus for us when we're setting this up, is making sure that we are providing and sourcing quality data so that you have good quality reports to help make these risk-based decisions off of.
Excellent. Now, Kelly Henson, who runs our marketing, she says, you do these webinars, you can't be too salesy. And I say, Kelly, if you solve a problem, you never need to sell anything. And I believe we solve some very important problems in this industry. So I don't look at it as selling. Scott, why don't we get out of the demo? And I think Scott has a couple of polling questions, and then we'll do that, and then we'll conclude. And if I've missed something, Kelly, you send me a text and let me know. I need to talk about it. So the first question, you want me to read them, Scott?
Sure.
All right. You've done a lot of talking today, and I appreciate it. And I'll handle this one. So the first question is, if Nacha 2026 was a weather forecast. Now, I did not write these questions. Kelly wrote these questions. I just want everybody to understand that. All right. How would it look for your teams? You only get to make one choice. Sunny and 75. Sunny here in Clearwater, but it's not 75. Partly cloudy. That means there's some gaps to fill. Stormy. There's still a lot to do and figure out. And then I guess we need to say hurricane warning and not tornado warning, given that we're in Florida. So if you could answer that one, I'd be grateful. And the second one, was there any capability that would be a game changer for your team? And I mean, I don't know why we're just giving you one option here, Kelly. We should have more than one option for this question, but she's governed one option. Detection for anomalous activity, return pattern and return rate monitoring, velocity monitoring to flag spikes, and then, all the above. Thank you, Kelly. I'm sorry I didn't read them before I gave you the business. So if you could answer those, and I'm not sure, and let's click submit, and I'm not sure if we can see the results or how any of that works, but I guess we'll find out here in a minute. How long do we need to wait for this, Scott? Do you know?
People are still answering. Let's give them
Okay.
just another moment.
All right, good. You can see the result. Can you pull the results up?
I will. As soon as the polling closes, we should get the results on screen. And in the meantime, if anybody has any additional questions we haven't answered, please feel free to fill those out. And I know a number of people talked or typed in during the webinar. You can use this contact page to reach out to us, existing clients or potential clients. If anyone wants to get an in-depth demo, follow up with additional questions, API requests, what have you, just reach out. We are glad to discuss this with you.
There's one last question I'll read it. James, how did you get so lucky to find such a magnificent, eloquent team? And when Scott and Kim and Kelly, and I got to tell you, I have no idea. It's just sheer luck that I'm able to surround myself with these folks and some other fine folks here at Affirmative. Do you want to show the results, or we have time for that?
It's not really sharing. Like I said,
here we go. Partly cloudy. It looks like partly cloudy wins. We like partly cloudy, some gaps to fill. That's actually how we think about our approach to engaging with clients. Is there's so much this platform does. Understanding what your gaps are and helping you fill those first and getting clarity around that. That's how we approach, working with our existing clients and our new clients. Looks like stormy. There's still a lot to figure out. Hopefully this session has been somewhat helpful in that regard. And then the anomalous activity detection and a return pattern. Let's see. Do you scroll down in that second one? Oh yeah, all the above, even better. That's fantastic, guys. We really appreciate that. There's more to come. We're always working on this, not just related to Nacha 26, but other items. And stay tuned for that. And then finally, just in conclusion, I want to thank our esteemed panelists, Scott and Kim. Thank you for your time. Kelly, thank you for being the maestro of the event, as always, making things very efficient. Thank the whole Affirmative teams, a wonderful group of people. I think our clients, I hope, love us almost without exception. Maybe there's a few too out there we just haven't had time to convince yet. I don't know. But and then we've got a few events that are coming up. We have here, and then if you click on that QR code, you can reach out to us, and then we'll follow up with you. Thank you all for your time. Hope you have a wonderful day.